At the reception desk of a luxurious hotel, everyone was confused in front of the German millionaire. No one understood a word he was saying, until a humble housekeeper took an unexpected step and stunned everyone with a secret she had kept for years. The lobby of the Atlantic Grand Hotel was the kind of place where everything always seemed to be in the right spot. The flowers in the tall vases never wilted. The piano played something soft, and no one spoke loudly. Employees drifted back and forth as if in slow motion, straightening details that most people would never notice. Everything felt under control. Until that day, it was almost 2 p.m., when a tall man in a dark suit pushed through the glass doors with decisive strides. He carried a black leather travel briefcase, the kind you see with road warriors who've already flown through a dozen airports in the same week. Fair skin, neatly combed hair, an impatient expression. It wasn't hard to tell he had money. You could tell at a glance. The trouble began when he reached the reception counter. The first to help him was Natalie, a front desk agent. Smile on her face, impeccable uniform, the posture of someone used to every kind of guest. But the moment the man opened his mouth, she froze. He spoke German, not English with an accent, not halting Spanish. German, fast, very fast. Natalie blinked a few times, trying to catch a word here and there, but she couldn't keep up. She tried answering with, "Sorry, do you speak English?" But the man made an impatient gesture, as if irritated at not being understood. He pointed at his phone, then at his watch, spoke louder, gestured. They called another front desk agent, Ryan, who knew a little English, but it was useless. The German kept talking only in German and was clearly getting angry. Other guests began to watch, some even snickered at the confusion. The shift manager showed up trying to keep calm, but only made things worse. The German seemed upset about some wrong reservation or a service that hadn't been delivered. At one point he even raised his voice. He didn't shout, but he spoke with force, like someone desperate to resolve something important. That's when she appeared. Julia, in the navy blue housekeeper uniform, was pushing a cleaning cart down the side corridor. She had no idea what was going on. She just noticed the strange movement and the commotion at the desk. As she drew closer, she heard a few words and stopped. She stood silent, watching. After a few seconds, she took a breath, parked the cart, and walked toward the counter. No one quite understood what she was doing. The manager motioned as if to say, "Go back to your area." But she didn't. She went up to the man, stopped beside him, and said something in German, just like that. With a perfect accent, steady voice, without hesitation. The man stopped instantly and looked at her, surprised, then answered. Julia responded. The two began to converse, and in less than a minute, she'd already figured out what the problem was. She explained, translated everything for the manager, fixed what needed fixing, and within minutes the German guest was smiling, nodding, saying "Danke" several times. The lobby went quiet for a few seconds. Even the pianist hit a wrong note. No one had expected that. Julia thanked them politely, gave a discreet smile, and went back to pushing her cart as if nothing had happened. But something had happened, and everyone knew it. In the staff area, the story spread faster than backstage gossip. "Did you see Julia speaking German?" "She was fluent, man. Looks like she lived abroad. Maybe she's got a degree." No one was sure of anything, but everyone wanted to know. Julia, however, went back to the room she was cleaning as if she'd merely helped someone find the elevator. Natalie, the front desk agent, was still a little stunned. She sat down, took a sip of water, and stared at the door. She had never imagined that the quiet woman who cleaned the halls and kept to herself was hiding that. In the monitoring room, the cameras had recorded it all. The head of security remarked to the manager, "Did you hear how she spoke? You don't learn that from a couple of YouTube videos." She studied. The manager nodded, impressed. For the first time in weeks, he felt something genuinely interesting had happened at the hotel. At the end of the day, Julia got home tired, took off her uniform, dropped her backpack on the couch, and went straight to see her mom in the bedroom. The older woman was lying down, watching a drama. Julia smiled and sat on the edge of the bed. She didn't say a word about the German, nor the looks she got, nor the rumors already circling. To her it was just another day of work. Maybe a little stranger than usual, but that was all. She knew exactly why she was there, knew how much she needed that paycheck. She also knew she'd been through far worse than being ignored for wearing a simple uniform. She just didn't know that her story had started to change that day, and she had no idea how big the change ahead would be. The next day, the topic had already become legend in the halls of the Atlantic Grand Hotel. And in that place, where everyone kept an eye on everything, it only took a half morning for a story to spread. Julia spoke German, fluently, without mistakes. That alone was enough to turn her from an almost invisible housekeeper into someone everyone wanted to know more about. In the staff break room, the coffee barely had time to cool with people rushing in and out, retelling the same story again, each time with an extra detail. "I swear she didn't even stammer," said a woman from admin, pouring sugar into her cup without looking. And he was German for real, not some lost tourist. Across the table, a security guard just shook his head, finding it all strange. In housekeeping management, where the cleaning staff organized schedules and supplies, the vibe had shifted. Some women approached Julia as if a celebrity had been discovered next door. Others just watched. Martha, the supervisor, pretended nothing had changed, but her face said otherwise. She didn't like surprises, especially not ones that came from someone who wasn't on her radar. During the day, Julia moved along the corridors with the same cart, cleaning the same rooms, as if nothing had happened. But the way people looked at her had changed. Some front desk staff greeted her with a more careful smile than before. Some guests now said good morning and asked if she was the woman from the German incident. At lunch, seated in the back of the cafeteria, she noticed two co-workers whispering and laughing while glancing at her. That wasn't new, but what had once been pure disdain now felt more like nosy curiosity. She pretended not to notice. Julia had never liked drawing attention, especially in a place where her job was literally to go unnoticed. What she didn't know was that morning, the front desk agent Natalie had been called in to speak with the manager. It was a quick conversation, but enough to plant a seed. He asked exactly what had happened the day before. He wanted details, how the guest reacted, what the housekeeper had said, how she solved it. Natalie told him everything, not understanding why it had become such a big deal. Down the hall, Ryan, the other front desk agent, spent the morning thinking about the episode. He felt uneasy, though he couldn't say why. It was a mix of embarrassment at not being able to solve it and resentment at seeing a housekeeper praised in the team's internal chat. He joked to a co-worker, "Next thing you know, she'll be manager, right?" Later, when Julia was discreetly called to the HR coordinator's office, she braced for a scolding. She sat with her heart thudding, foot tapping, only it wasn't a reprimand. The coordinator wanted to thank her for her initiative and professionalism. Julia thanked her politely, but left quickly, afraid of drawing more attention. In the elevator alone, she leaned against the stainless wall and closed her eyes for a few seconds. The whole thing felt odd. She'd merely helped someone, that was it. But there, in a place where people were treated according to their badges and uniforms, doing something unexpected seemed to throw the universe off balance. What nobody knew, and what Julia had no interest in broadcasting, was that she had spent years in classrooms, that she had a degree, proficiency certificates, and translation experience, that she had taught at a test prep center, at a private high school, and even done freelance proofreading for publishers. All of that had been left behind the day her mother got sick, and the bills wouldn't stop. Housekeeping was the only job that came through quickly, and she took it without drama. Meanwhile, at the front desk, the manager was organizing a new booking for a foreign group. The memory of the confusion with the German guest was still fresh. He jotted down almost absent-mindedly, "Check if anyone on shift speaks the language," and put in parentheses, "Julia." At the end of the shift, Martha found Julia in the locker room. They looked at each other for a second. Martha, with a stern face, asked if it was true she had spoken with the German guest. Julia simply said yes. Martha said nothing more, just turned her back and walked away. But the way she slammed the locker said it all. That night when Julia got home, she took off her sneakers at the door, put her uniform in the laundry bag, and went to the kitchen. She made tea for her mother, cooked a simple pot of pasta, and sat on the couch with the plate in her lap. The TV was on, but she wasn't watching. She thought about the way everyone had looked at her, The cafeteria where she could barely eat, the whispers, the fake smiles, the veiled questions. She knew how that went. She'd lived something like it before, and it always ended the same way. People upset when someone steps out of the place they were shoved into. She didn't want a promotion, didn't want to schmooze. She just wanted to do the job, get paid, and take care of her mum. That was all, but in that hotel, where everything seemed always under control, the unexpected had knocked on the door. And now no one knew how to pretend nothing had changed. The small place where Julia lived with her mother was modest and a little dim. The walls needed new paint. The furniture was old, and every item had been repaired at least 3 times before being thrown out. But it was clean, quiet, and smelled like fresh coffee. A worn-out couch creaked when someone sat, and the fan turned slowly with a little motor whine Julia no longer noticed. This was where she rested after work, and where she kept all the pieces of the life she hid from the world. That night, after a shower, she sat on the edge of her mother's bed to give her medicine. The older woman's eyes were sunken, her skin dry, her body weaker than before. A stroke 2 years earlier had taken part of her movement on the left side and slowed her speech, but her mind still worked perfectly. She knew everything and understood more than she let on. "Was there trouble at the hotel today?" her mother asked with effort. Julia smiled faintly. "There was, but it's handled." The mother looked at her for a few seconds. She knew her daughter didn't say everything. She knew Julia hid a lot so as not to worry her, but she'd learned to respect her daughter's quiet ways. After her mother fell asleep, Julia went to the kitchen, sat at the table, and opened an old blue notebook. It was the same one she had used when she taught at a test prep center. It held grammar notes, German vocabulary, exercises corrected in red pen. Time had yellowed the pages. She ran her finger over a line she wrote years ago. "Nothing learned is ever lost." She smiled sadly. The phrase felt like a cliché now. She was 28, but felt like she carried 40 on her back. A literature/linguistics grad, fluent in 3 languages, in a graduate program. Until life flipped. Julia had been a private school teacher, a freelance translator, and for a while she even dreamed of a master's degree at a state university. Organized, studious, always on time, she had everything to rise, and she did, but only as far as the paycheck allowed. Things began to unravel when her mom had the stroke. It was in the middle of the pandemic. Julia was teaching online for a prep center that soon started cutting instructors to save money. First they cut longevity pay, then they reduced class sections. When she was called into the coordinator's office, she knew what was coming. The director was polite enough, said the school was going through a tough phase, but Julia could think of nothing except the electric bill, the rent, her mom's medications. She tried other places, sent more than 50 resumes in 2 months, called, emailed, waited, for nothing. Either the pay was too low, or it was too far, or they wanted experience with small children, or they already had someone for the job. She saw doors close one by one until the money began to run out. She sold books, then furniture, until a neighbor mentioned an opening for housekeeping at a luxury hotel downtown. It was heavy work, but the pay was reliable, and she didn't think twice. In the interview, she didn't mention her degree, nor the German courses, nor her classroom experience. She answered only what HR asked and accepted the morning shift. She knew that if she said more than necessary, they might think she wouldn't last or would want to move up. Julia didn't want to arouse suspicion. She just needed work. The first days were rough. Her body ached, the hours were long, but she was never late, never absent, never complained. And even without saying much, she heard everything. She heard the jokes, the nicknames, the low-voiced critiques. One day someone called her stuck-up just because she said "excuse me" properly. A co-worker mocked the way she walked, the way she organized the cart, the way she wrote her own name on a clipboard. But she never answered back. She kept it all in. In her locker, Julia taped small notes with phrases only she understood. "Focus on what matters. Hold on 1 more month. She needs you." That's how she reminded herself why she was there, why she'd accepted a job so many people looked down on, and why she pretended not to hear. That week, after the episode with the German guest, it all came back strong. She remembered the first time she entered a classroom to teach, nervous, clutching the attendance list with sweaty hands. She remembered the first translation she did for a big company, reviewed and approved without a single error. She remembered her mother clapping at graduation, even with her health already fragile, and thought, how does life change so much, so fast? She should have been teaching, grading papers, giving talks, not picking up wet towels from a bathroom floor. But there she was, with her back aching and a faded uniform, and yet, despite everything, she wasn't ashamed. Work didn't diminish who she was. Julia knew that. She knew intelligence doesn't expire, that knowledge stays put. It just needs the right space to come out again. But the world isn't fair to people wearing a housekeeping badge. And she'd learned not to expect recognition. That's why, when she suddenly became the subject of the hotel, when she heard people saying her name in the halls, she felt more fear than pride, because she knew what came next: suspicion, envy, questions. She had worked hard to stay invisible, but now there was no pretending that no one had noticed. The hardest part was not knowing whether that would help or hurt. The next morning, before 8 a.m., Julia was already the main topic behind the scenes at the Atlantic Grand Hotel. The buzz wasn't coming from the top, it came from the service corridors, service elevators, and the staff break room. Everyone wanted to know who she was, where she came from, and why no one knew that the quiet cleaner spoke German better than Google Translate. In the break room, the smell of toast and butter mixed with hushed talk and curious looks. A laundry worker dropped the line that kept echoing in many minds. Maybe she's pretending to be a housekeeper to spy on the hotel. Someone laughed. Another said that was over the top, but a few stayed quiet. When you work in a place full of luxury without ever stepping into a room as a guest yourself, you end up inventing your own theories about everything. In housekeeping management, the head of the team, Martha, listened. She didn't say much, but she heard it all. She had a certain power there. Respected, sometimes feared, she did the job right, but liked to make clear who was in charge. The fact that one of her employees was getting attention outside of housekeeping was starting to bother her. During the start of shift meeting, Martha kept a serious face, gave the usual notices, then dropped a direct note at the whole group. Folks, let's focus on what matters. Everyone here has a role, and that's what keeps this hotel standing. No showboating. Julia, in the corner, understood. It was aimed at her. At the front desk, Natalie tried to work as usual, but people kept bugging her about the German incident. She was getting tired of it. It started to rankle. She felt, in a way, sidelined, as if everyone had forgotten she'd tried to solve it too. The difference was that Julia had succeeded, and now the whole hotel knew it. Ryan, the other front desk agent, told a co-worker he found it too odd that a housekeeper spoke German that well. Maybe she isn't who she says she is, he muttered lightly, with a drop of poison. It was enough for some to start looking at Julia with suspicion, and rumors there traveled faster than a service elevator. In the kitchen corridors, an assistant said he'd heard she had been a teacher. Another said no, that she was married to a foreigner and learned the language that way. Nobody really knew, but everyone had a ready theory. Martha, always with a clipboard and her eyes everywhere, began paying closer attention to Julia's steps. She started flagging tardiness she used to ignore, complained about Julia's uniform even when it matched everyone else's, claimed her cart was messy, even when it wasn't, subtle but steady, a way to wear someone down. One day, while Julia cleaned room 712, Martha appeared in the doorway and stood watching. She said nothing for a few minutes, then let it drop slowly. A hotel is no place for vanity. When we start drawing too much attention, we lose focus. Julia answered calmly, I only helped because no one else could. Martha smiled coldly. Right, and sometimes helping too much becomes the problem. And she left. The sentence stayed with Julia the rest of the day. In the locker room after her shift, she opened her locker and saw that the little note she kept taped inside, "Focus on what matters," was gone. Instead, there was a torn scrap with ugly handwriting. Want to show off? Be an actress. She looked, breathed deeply, and dropped it in the trash without a word. Inside, though, something hurt. It wasn't fear or anger. It was sadness. That sense of being treated as a threat just for showing she knew more than expected. In the cafeteria, talk became more careful when she was around. Some tried to chat, but only out of curiosity, to pry more information out of her. Julia noticed and sidestepped, giving them nothing. One of the few who approached sincerely was Cindy, a new hire in housekeeping. She sat beside Julia and spoke plainly. "You're good. I thought what you did with that guest was awesome. Don't mind the rest. People here don't like seeing anyone step out of line." Julia gave her a real smile. It was rare, but it reminded her she wasn't completely alone there. Upstairs in administration, the operations manager began drafting a report about the German guest. Leadership had requested it. He didn't know exactly why, but followed protocol and, of course, included Julia's role. Meanwhile, Martha began telling co-workers, quietly, that Julia was playing humble but wanted to climb. Said she was using the episode to stand out. Most pretended not to hear, but took note. Tension grew by degrees, not loud, more like a rope tightening quietly until it snaps. Julia felt it. She felt it in the sideways looks, in the way everyone now weighed her every move. The housekeeper uniform, once her shield, now drew more attention than it should, as if she were in disguise. But the truth was different. She only wanted to do her job, that's all. At that hotel, though, being too good at what they didn't expect you to know was dangerous. Andrew's arrival at the hotel had been announced in advance. He was the kind of owner who never warned when he was coming. He liked to see things as they really were, without last-minute makeup. At 35, he was already a reference in the luxury hotel business. He'd inherited the brand from his father, but he had expanded it, modernized it, and grown the name outside the United States. Intelligent, discreet, observant. He knew the names of managers and directors, but almost no one from the operational staff, at least until that day. In the executive office, the general manager checked his watch 3 times before 10 a.m. He was nervous when Andrew walked in, wearing dark jeans, a simple shirt, and a blazer. The atmosphere changed. Andrew greeted quickly but politely. He sat, asked for coffee, and got straight to the point. "I want to know about the housekeeping employee who resolved the issue with the German guest." The GM swallowed. He had prepared updates on monthly numbers, the restaurant's new menu, and a digital marketing plan, but none of that seemed to matter. Yes, of course. Julia, she helped translate when no one understood the guest. It was quick but efficient. Andrew crossed his arms. "That's it?" The GM hesitated, then grabbed the report and read a few excerpts. She spoke to him in German, translated with precision, and cleared up the wrong reservation. According to the guest, it was one of his best service experiences in the United States. He praised her a lot. Andrew listened in silence, then asked, "Is she a college graduate?" The GM shook his head. "Don't know. Her HR file lists only high school." Andrew was thoughtful for a few seconds, then stood. "I want to speak with her today. Let me know when she's off the floor." The GM's eyes widened. "Do you want her to come here?" "No, I want to see her in her space." He left without further explanation. In housekeeping, Julia was changing sheets on the 5th floor, mind tired, arms sore. She didn't know someone upstairs was asking about her, someone whose name she had only ever seen printed on executive badges and at the bottom of emails. Andrew spent much of the day walking the property, discreetly observing. He visited common areas, chatted with a few guests, and watched the team's rhythm. At one point, he crossed paths with Julia in the corridor. She was pulling the cart. He didn't know it was her. She had no idea who he was. They glanced at each other for a second. Julia gave a polite smile. He nodded. After she passed, he asked a nearby employee, "Is that Julia?" The person confirmed. Andrew stood still for a moment. At first glance, she didn't look different. Just another focused employee. But he sensed something in the way she walked, in her attentive eyes, in her quiet. It wasn't the posture of someone there just out of necessity. It was as if she were always alert, reading the room. Late afternoon, the manager appeared in the housekeeping office where Julia was logging room status. He adopted that bureaucratic tone that pretends to be casual but never is. "Julia, Mr. Andrew is here today. He'd like a quick chat. Simple thing, okay?" She stopped writing and looked up slowly. She swallowed. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, not at all. Just a conversation. He's curious about the guest situation. That's all. She wiped her hands on her uniform cloth and followed the manager. They rode down 2 floors in silence, her heart racing. When she entered the conference room where Andrew waited, she paused by the door, unsure if she should sit. He stood, offered a calm smile, and shook her hand. "So you're the famous Julia?" She shook his hand, not quite sure what to say. "I just helped that day. No one understood the gentleman, and I read the report, but I wanted to hear it from you." She told it simply, without embellishment, said she spoke German because she'd studied for years, that she'd worked in translation, that she had a literature linguistics degree, and that she was now in housekeeping because that was the job that came through. Direct, no fluff. Andrew listened, not interrupting. He was quiet for a few seconds after she finished. "Do you like working here?" She thought before answering. "I need the job, and I'm grateful to have been hired. But like?" "I liked teaching." Andrew nodded, then stood, thanked her, and said he might need to speak with her again. No promises, no over-the-top praise. Simple. But the way he looked at her, as if he really saw beyond the uniform, stirred something inside her. When she left the room, her knees felt a little weak. Not because she was dazzled by a millionaire, but because it had been a long time since anyone had listened to her story without judgment, without a sideways look, without rushing. That same night, Andrew stayed at the hotel, booked a simple room without fanfare, ate dinner alone, and spent hours reviewing notes on his tablet. But from time to time, Julia's face drifted back into his mind, and it wasn't because of the German incident. There was something there he couldn't yet explain. The next morning, bright and early, Julia was called again. It wasn't a regular meeting time. The supervisor relayed the message. The hotel owner wanted to see her, this time at the rooftop restaurant. The news spread faster than fresh coffee in the cafeteria, and she felt the eyes on her, heavier now, as if pulling on her with their stare. She had no time to overthink. She took the service elevator with a clean uniform and her hair in a simple bun. When she arrived, the restaurant was still closed to the public. Just one server arranging tables and Andrew near the window, tapping at his phone. The view stretched over the whole city, but he seemed more interested in seeing Julia arrive. She stopped at the entrance, a little unsure. He stood and motioned for her to sit. No blazer this time, just a button-down with sleeves rolled up, watch on his wrist, a more relaxed air. "Thanks for coming. Make yourself comfortable." She sat carefully, trying to read what this was. Not a meeting, not a scolding, not a trap, but also not a moment to lower her guard. "Coffee?" he asked, already signaling the server. "Sure, thank you." The silence between them lasted a few seconds, not uncomfortable. More like a pause of curiosity. He studied her, she studied him. "You know, when I heard a housekeeper handled a situation with an international guest, I thought it was exaggerated, but after I heard you speak, it was clear it wasn't." Julia shrugged, trying to stay calm. "I only translated." He was nervous. "I understood what he needed," I explained, and that was it. Andrew looked her right in the eyes. "How many people here speak German like you?" she breathed. "I don't know, but I imagine not many." The server arrived with the coffees. Andrew nodded thanks and continued. "Julia, you seem like someone who tries not to draw attention." "I try." "Why?" She stirred her coffee before answering. "Because when you stand out here, people notice, and when they notice too much, they start thinking you want something that isn't yours." He leaned back, thoughtful. "Do you? Want something more than housekeeping? A different role? A change?" She took a moment. "I want to pay for my mom's medicine. I want to keep the lights on. I want to sleep knowing there's food in the fridge next month. If that comes with a different role, great. But I didn't come here chasing that." Her directness seemed to catch Andrew off guard. He wasn't used to answers without detours. It made him want to know her more. "Before this, what did you do?" She told him. Her education, the classes, the layoff. No drama, just a straightforward history. He listened carefully, sometimes muttering, "Wow," sometimes only nodding. "Do you regret coming here?" "No. It's what I could do. And work is work, right?" He was silent for a few seconds, stirred his coffee, thought, and said, "Julia, you're not going to stay invisible for long, even if you want to." She smiled briefly. "That's not always good, you know." Andrew smiled too. Maybe not. But talent like yours doesn't stay hidden. They sat there, gazing at the skyline. Sunlight hit the tallest buildings. The city didn't stop, and neither did the hotel. But for a few minutes, at that quiet corner table on the terrace, time seemed to slow. Before leaving, Andrew set a business card on the table. If you ever want to talk about work, about possibilities, text me. No pressure, she looked at the card, then at him. Thank you. Then left. On the way out, a knot tightened in her stomach. It wasn't fear or anxiety. It was something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. She also knew all too well that in places like that, too much hope could become a problem. And some people were already moving behind the scenes. She just didn't know it yet. Friday morning, the administrative hallway was busier than usual. Quick steps, phones ringing non-stop, that muffled clatter of keyboards. Julia entered through the service entrance, as always, but this time she was called straight to the second floor. A polite security guard with an overly serious Dawn face told her. She climbed with her heart pounding, trying to guess what it might be. There, she was led into the events coordinator's office. Bright walls, old conference posters, open planners on the desk, a whiteboard crammed with colorful notes, and sitting there, multitasking with the look of someone who solves 1,000 things at once, was Lauren, head of the hotel's events department. Hi, Julia, right? Sit here a sec. Julia sat, confused. Andrew spoke with us yesterday, said you have language experience, customer service background, and that you helped with the guest from Germany. Is all that true? It is. Great. We have an international conference here next week, doctors and executives from the healthcare sector, people from several countries, and honestly, we have a gap in bilingual support. I know you work in housekeeping, but would you consider helping as an event support assistant for translation and foreign guest reception? Not permanent. Just a few days. Julia went quiet for a few seconds, stared at Lauren as if to confirm this was real. Me? Sure, if it won't get in the way, I can. Lauren smiled. It won't, and you'll get additional pay for those days. We'll square it with HR. In that moment, Julia felt a mix of good nerves. She was hearing a proposal from another department. As if she were someone important, someone they knew could help. But she also tensed, imagining the chatter. She knew it would be talk of the day. Praise around there could annoy people too. That same day, she was routed to a quick meeting with front desk and the events team. They gave her basics on schedules, international guest lists, hotel protocols, and the different uniforms she'd wear on conference days. She listened carefully, took notes, asked direct questions, as she always did. Meanwhile, in housekeeping, Martha had already heard. She knew even before the temporary role change hit the system. Someone from the front desk mentioned it in passing, and within half an hour people were saying Julia was leaving housekeeping. Some spoke with admiration, others with that disguised sneer. See? The star's moving to another department now, one worker quipped in the locker room while putting on her smock. Martha walked in without saying good morning, looked around and dropped, just a reminder, around here, we should know our place. People who try to help too much eventually slip. That was it. She left. Julia, meanwhile, tried to keep her feet on the ground. She knew the opportunity was good, but also knew it could backfire. Even so, she accepted, because the extra pay would help with new tests her mom needed that the clinic had been slow to authorize. And because, deep down, she missed using what she had studied her whole life. In the following days, she split time between departments. She still helped with housekeeping in the morning, then was released to join event meetings, review lists, and practice technical vocabulary in German and English. When she spoke in those languages, people stopped to listen. It was like watching someone do magic in the middle of the room. Some long-time employees shot her dirty looks, said she was full of herself, that she wanted the spotlight. But she was only doing what she knew, and in a place where many pretend to know more than they do, that can feel like a provocation. During a coffee break, one of the events guys struck up a chat. Julia, ever worked in hotels before? No, I taught for a while and did some translation gigs. Well, that explains the poise. You're good, she thanked him, shy, and kept sipping in silence. She still found it strange to be treated with respect by a department that, not long ago, didn't even know she existed. The day before the conference, Lauren called Julia into a small side room and handed her a temporary badge with the new function. "Don't worry about gossip, okay? We need efficient people. And Andrew trusts you. That's what matters right now." She took the badge and held it tightly for a few seconds. She knew it was only for a few days, but inside it felt like the start of something she couldn't name yet. On the bus ride home, as always crowded, Julia stood, holding the pole, swaying with the turns. But unlike other days, a contained smile sat on her face, the kind of smile that doesn't come easy, the kind that shows up when you start remembering that you still have worth and maybe, just maybe, someone up there, not God, the owner of the hotel, had begun to see it too. Julia's new badge seemed to weigh twice as much as the old one, even though it was just a plastic card with a different blue stripe. Temporary, she knew, but it felt like the beginning of a new phase. She tried not to show it, but she was nervous. With every step through the hotel corridors, she felt eyes from all sides, some surprised, some judgmental, a few envious. The silence weighed the most, because silence says more than any snide remark. On the first morning of the event, she arrived earlier than everyone. She wore a new uniform, a simple white shirt with the hotel logo on her chest and dark dress pants. No smock, no gloves, no cleaning cart. The staff restroom mirror showed a reflection she hadn't seen in a long time. She stood there a few seconds, trying to recognize that version of herself that looked as if she'd finally woken up after a long time in hiding. The lobby buzzed. Signs, panels, extra receptionists, staff with earpieces and clipboards. It was the first day of the International Medical Conference, and the schedule was full. Julia received the list of foreign speakers, their nationalities, and arrival times. Early on, she had to receive two groups, one from Germany and one from Belgium. She took a radio and a clipboard and headed to the entry doors with the calm of someone who looked born for it. As the guests arrived, she approached smiling, spoke in German, helped with IDs, and calmly explained where each should go. No mistakes, no doubts. When Lauren checked in to see if all was well, she simply flashed a thumbs up. Not everything was simple, though. During the morning break, when Julia went to the break room for quick coffee, she found two front desk employees chuckling. As soon as she walked in, they stopped talking and stared at her cup. One spoke loudly with a cynical smile. "Wow, she doesn't even look like housekeeping anymore." Just missing the heels, Julia didn't answer. She took her coffee, turned around and left. She knew how to handle this kind of jab. What hurt wasn't the joke but the feeling of not belonging anywhere. In housekeeping, they thought she was acting superior. In events, they thought she was an intruder. On the second day of the conference, she had to escort two foreign doctors to a reserved room. Along the way, they asked about the city, safety, and things to do. Julia answered everything in German and then in English. She joked, smiled, recommended a restaurant away from the tourist track. They were delighted. One of them commented, "You don't just work events, do you? You've got something extra." She thanked him, lowering her eyes. She'd learned to be wary of compliments too. On the other side of the hotel, Martha watched from afar. She walked around with her notepad, never missing a chance to ask co-workers quietly, "See that?" She's already walking around with the foreigners like she's an executive. Bet she shows up in a blazer next Julia, even hearing pieces of it, stayed steady, because when she got home she saw her mom taking her medication, saw the electric bill paid on the fridge, saw food in the pantry, and remembered it all came from this new role, even if temporary. That was bigger than any gossip. On the fourth day of the event, Lauren called Julia into the makeshift office. Phone in hand, listening to voice notes and replying to messages, she stopped everything to look at Julia seriously. "I just wanted to say, you're crushing it, really. We've had people hired just for this who didn't handle half the pressure. If you're up for it after the event, I want to talk about a permanent position with us." Julia stood still for a few seconds. Her heart thumped differently. "Sure, I'm up for a talk, cool, but for now let's focus." Today will be heavy, and it was. In the afternoon, one of the contracted interpreters had an issue and didn't show. It was a round table with American doctors and two Europeans. No one knew who could substitute with confidence. Time was running out, the audience was already taking seats, and someone said, "Call Julia." At first there was pushback. Some said better to wait, but there was no time. She was called. She sat at the table with an earpiece, a bottle of water, and a ready mic. She translated without tripping, calm, unhurried, precise. The audience followed. The guests didn't bat an eye. When she finished, there was even applause. In that moment, Andrew, watching from the back, crossed his arms and exhaled, as if confirming an idea he'd already had. He didn't say anything then, just observed. Later, leaving the hall, he passed Julia and murmured, "Congratulations. You shouldn't be here just for a few days. We'll talk." She thanked him, not sure what exactly that meant. That night, on the stiff mattress of her small home, Julia stared at the ceiling with her eyes wide open. Outwardly, everything looked the same. Inside it didn't. The world that had long been locked in a harsh routine was cracking open. But she didn't know if it was safe to step through. Martha had never been one to smile easily, and she wasn't talkative either. But when she spoke, people stopped and listened. Because they knew something was coming. She'd been at the Atlantic Grand a long time. She'd seen people come and go, rise and fall, and she always knew how to keep control. She was respected because she knew how to command. Not rude, but firm in a way that unsettled those one rung below. What Martha prized most was order, clear roles, everyone in their place, and now that order was being threatened, and the reason had a name: Julia. The whole hotel could tell things were changing. The quiet woman who used to walk, looking at the floor, now wore a blue badge and a new uniform. Worse for Martha, she was being praised. In the housekeeping office, where the schedule board hung, Martha was scribbling when she heard two staffers whispering near the door. She interpreted an entire panel yesterday. The Belgian guy even asked for a picture with her. Is she really leaving housekeeping? Looks like it. They're just waiting for the event to end to make it official. Martha closed the notebook, stood slowly, and looked at both. And you think that's pretty? The girls fell silent immediately. One swallowed, the other shook her head. People who step over their role end up tripping on their own ego, Martha said, and left the room with unhurried steps, like someone who knew exactly where she was going. In her head, what Julia was doing was wrong. She hadn't asked permission. She hadn't followed the line. She was moving too fast. And that, to Martha, was dangerous, because when someone starts climbing without you noticing, soon they're stepping over you. So she started doing what she did best, eroding from within. The next day, during a shift change, Martha went to the front desk with a notepad and stopped beside Natalie, who was printing bag tags. "So, has your housekeeping friend become a manager yet?" Natalie gave an awkward laugh. "Oh, Martha, she's just helping with the event." "Uh-huh. Just helping. But she's already talking to directors, right?" Martha left the comment hanging and walked off. Natalie was left with that seed of doubt, and that's exactly what Martha wanted, sowed out. Later, Martha appeared in the locker room, dropped a folder on a bench, and spoke loudly enough for nearby ears. Weird, she skipped 2 housekeeping shifts and didn't show on the absence log. Got special protection now? The words trickled through the corridors like dirty water. People who had only admired Julia began to wonder if she was getting special treatment. In a place where everyone grinds, that kind of thing turns poisonous quickly. The following week, when the event ended, Julia returned to housekeeping for a day to cover an absence. She arrived early, grabbed her cart, pulled on her gloves, and got to work with the same dedication as always. But something was different. Her co-workers barely looked at her. The air was icy. One woman let a door swing into Julia's face without apologizing. Another pretended not to hear when Julia asked for help with supplies. Mid-morning, when she entered room 806 to clean, she found the linen closet ransacked, wet towels thrown on the floor, toilet paper everywhere, and her supply caddy empty. It looked like sabotage. She didn't complain. She picked it all up, reorganized it herself, breathed, and kept going. After the shift, she went straight to Martha's office and calmly reported, "Something happened in 806. Everything was trashed, towels on the floor, paper everywhere, and my cart supplies disappeared." Just letting you know, Martha didn't lift her eyes. It happens. Sometimes guests make a mess. You need to learn to deal with it. Julia stood a beat, swallowed and left. But she already knew. It had been set up, and it wouldn't be the last. Martha wanted to make clear that in that department she still ruled. Julia wasn't one to pick fights, but she wasn't one to back down either. That evening at home, she finally let it out for the first time in months, talked to her mother while helping her lie down. Some people get bothered when we try to do better. Her mother squeezed her hand, and even without many words, passed on that silent certainty of someone who knows the path is hard, but that you don't turn back just because someone wants to push you down. The next day, Julia put on her support staff badge for events, tied up her hair and faced the mirror again. Her gaze was steady, and no matter what they tried, she wasn't going to lower her head so easily. Andrew wasn't the kind of boss who meddled in small operational details. That was always the manager's job. He stayed with the strategic, big numbers, investor meetings. But ever since he met Julia, something kept nagging at him. It was like a puzzle piece out of place, and that piece was her. In the weeks after the event, Andrew continued his routine of meetings, travel, spreadsheets, calls, but whenever he received a hotel report, he read with more attention. He looked for her name in notes, manager comments, any corner. Sometimes it didn't appear, and that made him even more curious. One morning, he called Lauren to chat in an administrative conference room. "Tell me more about Julia." Lauren raised her eyebrows. "Julia, from housekeeping?" "Yeah, but she's with you now, right? She helped us at the conference. She was amazing, and I've seen professionals with experience who didn't do half of what she did." Andrew folded his arms, staring out the window. "What else do you know about her?" Lauren thought before answering. "Almost nothing. She's discreet, speaks little, shows up, does what needs doing, and leaves. But it's obvious she's different. She doesn't force it, but she knows a lot and doesn't make a show of it. You can tell by how she reacts to things." Andrew was quiet, then asked, "Do you think she feels comfortable here?" Lauren shrugged. "I don't. Not completely. There's still a weird vibe around her. A lot of people didn't take the change well, especially housekeeping. She's treated like a traitor, you know." Andrew exhaled. He'd expected as much. Later, he called the HR manager to review employee records. He opened Julia's file. It was sparse: high school diploma, no listed certifications, no languages, no detailed work history. That made the itch worse. The data didn't match reality, and he hated that. He decided to look a little deeper, personally, not as the boss, but as someone who wanted to understand. He rang an old contact from his education investment days, a professor who coordinated a linguistics program at a state university, and asked in general terms, "Can someone with a degree in translation experience end up in housekeeping and no one notice?" The professor gave a sad chuckle. "Andrew, in the US, that happens every day. Educated, talented people working as cashiers, clerks, service workers. And no one notices because no one asks. They only see the uniform." That conversation stayed with him for days. At the end of the week, he returned to the hotel unannounced. He said he was reviewing exterior renovations. But the real reason was Julia. She was no longer in events. She'd gone back to housekeeping. When he saw her pushing the cart down the corridor, she seemed the same as before, the same calm look, the same steady posture, but also somehow more focused, more guarded. He noticed some employees avoided her eyes when she passed. Others stared too long, but no one smiled. It was as if she were a ghost everyone knew was there, but didn't want to face. At the end of the day, he ran into her near the employee exit, almost by accident. She was stepping out the side door as he came from an inspection. "Julia?" She stopped, surprised, but kept composed. "Mr. Andrew, good afternoon. Just Andrew, please." She nodded, gripping her backpack strap. "How are you?" "I'm fine, thank you." He was silent for a few seconds, choosing his words. "I noticed you're back in housekeeping." "Was that your choice?" she breathed. "That was the deal. I helped with the event, but it was never an official change." Just for a time, he nodded slowly. "But would you like to change?" Julia was quiet a moment, then she met his eyes. "I'd like to be seen for what I can do." That's all. Andrew had no answer for a few seconds, then smiled faintly. "You are. even if some people can't see it yet. Julia dipped her head in thanks and left. He stood there, watching her walk to the bus stop across the street, small backpack on her shoulders, crossing the avenue in the same simple way as always. Inside him, something had shifted. It wasn't only professional interest anymore, it was genuine curiosity. He wanted to know more. How someone so capable could be overlooked for so long, and he wondered what else she was hiding. It was supposed to be just another routine event at the Atlantic Grand, an executive gathering with foreign business people and executives from a multinational opening a US office. Nothing as grand as the medical conference, but important enough to put everyone on alert. Lauren arrived early, eyes red with fatigue, half a cup of coffee in hand. Delays began at dawn. The print shop misspelled 2 guest names on the badges. The AV team was slow setting the stage, and to top it off, the official interpreter called from the airport to say his flight was cancelled. The backup was in another state with no way to arrive in time. Less than 2 hours remained before opening. Lauren shot up from her chair. "What do you mean he's not coming?" "There's no one else," she practically shouted into the phone. The guy on the other side tried to explain, but she barely listened, pacing the support room and tapping the phone against her palm. "The opening panel is fully bilingual. We've got people from Germany, Switzerland, Austria. We need a simultaneous interpreter." The room went heavy. Lauren's assistant glanced sideways and said softly, "Julia, remember she translated that round table? She's here this morning on a housekeeping shift. Maybe—" Lauren was already walking out before she finished. Across the hotel, Julia was just finishing the ballroom restroom. She hadn't even taken off her gloves when Lauren showed up at the door, eyes wide, voice urgent. "Julia, I need you now." Julia froze for a second, trying to understand. "Interpretation?" she asked, peeling off her gloves. "Yes, the interpreter didn't arrive." "Important event, opening panel, real time. Can you cover it?" "I can," she answered, steady. They moved fast through corridors while Lauren explained the basics. What the event was, who the guests were, what Julia would need to interpret. In the support room, the sound tech fitted her earpiece. Julia scanned the agenda, made quick notes, asked for a bottle of water. A protocol staffer, seeing her still in a wrinkled housekeeping uniform, whispered, "She's the interpreter?" Lauren cut him off. "She is, and she'll do better than anyone I've ever hired." 10 minutes later, Julia sat beside the stage with a translation mic and an earpiece. Beyond the glass, the audience took their seats. In the front row, Andrew arrived quietly. No one had been told he'd attend. He sat with an attentive expression and watched. The ceremony began. The MC gave the intros in English. Julia translated into German. Direct, no stumbles, with the right tone and tempo. When a Swiss executive began a technical talk in German, she rendered it into English clearly, as if born doing it. The audience understood, reacted, applauded. Mid-presentation, one German businessman leaned toward a colleague and murmured, "Who's interpreting?" "This is better than many official interpreters Andrew heard," said nothing, smiled to himself. When the opening ended, Julia left the booth, sweat on her brow, shoulders tense. She headed to the back where Lauren waited with relief and pride. "You saved us," Lauren said, handing her water. "It was the least I could do," Julia said, catching her breath. Later, as she packed the equipment, she noticed Andrew approaching. "Julia," he said simply, "what you did today was exceptional. Again." She smiled, a little shy. "I just did what I know how to do. And I'm only starting to understand how much you know." Before she could answer, a housekeeping employee wandered nearby, pretending to tidy the trash. But she was listening. Seeing the two talk like that, with Andrew looking at Julia as if she were from another world, the woman hurried off. In housekeeping, Martha heard the news from that co-worker herself. "She saved the event alone." "You've got to be kidding." The other woman nodded. "Everyone saw. They're saying the owner will pull her into another role. Maybe even permanent." Martha narrowed her eyes, snapped her planner shut, and said flatly, "That girl has no idea who she's dealing with." After the event Julia had saved, the hotel's vibe changed. Not for everyone. For some, she became a reference point. For others, a threat. Lauren, for one, made a point of stating that Julia's performance had been essential. She sent an email to hotel leadership formally thanking Julia's support in the interpreter's absence, sprinkled with agility, exemplary performance, and technical capacity above average fine so far. The problem began when that email was forwarded to administration and then fell into the grapevine. In the women's locker room at shift change, the buzz started early. "Did you see what Lauren wrote about her?" "I did." "Guess she's a celebrity now." "Not a celebrity, honey. A candidate for management, right? You think the boss would praise her like that for nothing?" The comment dripped venom, and it wasn't the only one. Behind the scenes, Julia's name turned into a fixed topic, no longer admiration, but annoyance. Martha heard about the email early in the shift. One of her sycophants brought the info tied with a bow. "Looks like Julia's getting a new role. They're talking about moving her to events permanently." Martha pretended not to care, but inside she boiled. This wasn't just any employee rising. This was someone slipping out of her control. Unacceptable. That day, sharper jabs began. At shift change, Martha made sure to speak loudly. "Some people aren't even working their hours, right? They spend more time upstairs having coffee with leadership than cleaning floors. Then they still want to be seen as examples." Julia heard. Everyone heard. No one said a thing. She swallowed her anger and kept moving. In the afternoon, Martha pulled a younger worker and told her to take Julia's slot, claiming Julia was now in transition to another role and shouldn't be doing heavy work. Said it with disdain and that fake elegance she used to mask the poison. The girl was embarrassed, confused, but obeyed. When Julia noticed her schedule was changed without notice, she approached Martha respectfully. "Hi, Martha. I saw my schedule change today. Was that just for today, or—" Martha didn't lift her eyes from the paper. "Well, you're a star now. We're sparing you so your international translations aren't disrupted." The sarcasm was so thick you could cut it with a knife. In the cafeteria, more chatter. One worker said loudly, cup of juice in hand, "I don't know who she thinks she is. Just because she speaks some odd language, she thinks she's superior. Housekeeper or fluent, the floor's the same at the end of the day." It was impossible not to see jealousy curdling into anger. And when that happens, any detail becomes ammo. The next week, a reservation error was pinned on Julia. A foreign guest complained his name was misspelled on the event roster, causing confusion at the entrance. Julia hadn't even worked that shift, but mysteriously her name was listed as responsible for that group. Lauren was baffled and called Julia in. "You're sure this wasn't you?" "Absolutely. I wasn't even scheduled then." Lauren believed her, but asked Julia to double-check her reports. Julia left with a churning stomach, and it didn't stop there. In HR, someone began questioning whether she really had the language certificates she claimed. Martha had quietly suggested as much in an offhand chat with an HR clerk, using the excuse that it's better to be safe than to trust too much in someone new. The news reached Andrew. He was silent when he heard, unimpressed, not with the doubt, but with the malice. Someone was clearly trying to smear Julia drip by drip. He called HR and told them not to demand or chase documents about her education unless at his direct request. That day, Andrew watched the hotel from his office. Through the window, he saw Julia hurrying by with a folder, face tense, eyes more closed off than usual. He reached for his phone, thought of calling, then didn't. He knew it wasn't the right moment to step in. At home that night, Julia nursed a headache. She made tea for her mom, sat on the couch, and kept quiet. The TV was on, but she didn't watch it. The exhaustion had spread from body to soul. She was starting to wonder whether she'd done the right thing taking the events assignment. Because ever since leaving housekeeping, it felt like she wore a target on her back. Then she looked at her mom sleeping peacefully, breathing easier since starting the new medication, the one she'd only been able to afford with the event bonus. And then, even with all the pressure, Julia knew she was on the right path. She just had no idea how dirty it could get. Around 8 p.m., Julia's phone buzzed in her uniform pocket. She was still at the hotel finishing a materials handoff spreadsheet. Unknown number. She thought of ignoring it, but picked up. "Hello? Julia?" "It's Andrew." She froze for 2 seconds. His voice was unmistakable. "Hi, good evening. Are you very busy?" "Just closing out some notes." Can you stop by the 8th floor conference room before you leave? She hesitated. Now, if you can. She paused a beat. I'm coming. She hung up, stared at the open spreadsheet, took a breath, closed the laptop, grabbed her backpack, and went. She took the service elevator, empty at that hour, the hum of the motor and her own loud heartbeat. When she reached the 8th floor, the corridor was silent. A ceiling light flickered slowly at the far end. The conference room door was ajar. She tapped twice and stepped in. Andrew sat alone at the big table, no blazer, sleeves rolled. Half a bottle of water beside him. His laptop was open, but he wasn't looking at the screen. Come in, he said gently. Julia entered, closed the door, and remained standing. You can sit. This isn't anything bad. She sat in the nearest chair, adjusting the backpack in her lap. Did something happen? Andrew ran his hand over his beard, searching for the words. It did. Actually, it is happening, and I wanted to hear it from you. She stayed quiet. I've been told you're the target of gossip, that people are trying to sabotage you, plant doubt in your work, question your past. Is that true? Julia looked straight at him. It is. Since when? Since I was asked to help with the event. First looks, then whispers and jokes, now more direct things. They change my schedule without telling me, spread that I'm getting special treatment, even pinned an error on me that I didn't make. Andrew drew a breath. Martha. Julia didn't answer, just shrugged. Some people are bothered that I'm here, and that I know things they didn't expect me to know. Why didn't you tell me? Because I learned not to ask for help easily, because I thought I could handle it. Andrew was quiet, then spoke more softly. I asked you here because I wanted to understand from you, not from rumors. From the start I saw you weren't ordinary, and I got curious, not only about your ability but about you. She lowered her eyes a second. Julia, can I ask something else? Personal, you can. What made you take a housekeeping job from scratch? She stared ahead and answered slowly, without detours. My mum had a stroke. I spent months trying to find work in my field, but nothing came. The bills kept coming. This hotel was the only place that called fast. It wasn't my dream, but it showed up. And I took it, because hunger and rent don't wait. Andrew nodded, thoughtful. Ever think about leaving, going somewhere else? Sure. But every time I think about it, I remember my mum depends on this insurance, this paycheck. And here, as bad as it can be sometimes, I've managed to keep it all going. He looked at her with an expression that wasn't just professional, there was admiration there, maybe something more. You're strong, you know? She gave an awkward laugh. Strong because I take it in silence. Or because I don't clap back. Strong because you keep going when you could stop. She went quiet. Julia, I want to invite you to something. But not here, not now. First, I needed to hear you, see what's really happening, without middlemen. I don't want to decide based only on reports. I wanted to know you. She stared, surprised. Know me, or just figure out if I fit a role. Andrew smirked slightly. Both, and maybe one more thing I can't quite name yet. Julia felt heat rise to her face and looked away. He stood. Can I walk you to the employee exit? No need, I'll be fine. Let me leave first then. Better. He laughed softly. All right. Julia, don't let these people shove you back into a place you've already outgrown. She nodded. Andrew stepped out first. When the door closed behind him, Julia leaned back in the chair and stayed there alone for a few minutes, mind buzzing, heart tight. She'd entered that place just to pay bills. Now, without noticing, she was in the middle of a war mixing ambition, resentment, and maybe something else. The hardest part was knowing who, in that whole game, was really on her side. After that conversation, something shifted. Not visible to others. No hugs, no lingering looks. But there was a closeness only the attentive would notice. A few extra minutes in conversation. A different way of listening. A silence that didn't bother. In the following days, Andrew showed up more often in the hotel corridors. The excuse was always the same. Review upgrades, check renovations, go over admin reports. But he was clearly watching more closely, and watching Julia. She, on the other hand, tried to carry on as if nothing had happened. She continued supporting events, yet still pitched in with housekeeping when needed. She kept the pace, the care, the focus. But now, when Andrew walked by, she felt her whole body go on alert. Not fear, something else. The discomfort of being seen differently and not yet knowing if that was good or bad. On a rainy Tuesday morning, Julia walked out of the cafeteria with a coffee in hand and spotted Andrew chatting with Lauren in the corridor. He was relaxed, laughing at something, and when he saw Julia, he stopped and waved. "Morning, Julia." "Morning. Had coffee?" She lifted her cup with a tiny smile. "I did." "Good. I'll be around today if you need anything." She nodded and kept walking, but felt Lauren's eyes on that exchange. Not judgmental, more like on alert. "I'm noticing." That afternoon, when the reservation system crashed for half an hour and a group of foreign guests arrived unannounced, the front desk spun out. No one knew how to manage check-ins, names didn't match, and the guests were already irritated. Julia happened by on her way upstairs with materials when she saw the chaos. She approached the desk, asked quickly what was going on, and before anyone could say, "Not your job," she was speaking in English and German to the guests, explaining, asking for patience, and taking their information by hand. Andrew appeared in the middle of the mess and said nothing. He leaned against the wall and watched. In under 15 minutes, it was sorted. Julia set up a line, took down details, placed the guests in a cool lounge with water while the system came back. After everything normalized, as she was leaving, Andrew approached. "Do you realize what you just did?" "I just solved it. They were upset and no one could communicate." "Julia, do you realize what it means to do that calmly in a crisis? Without prep, without being scheduled?" She shrugged. "If I hadn't, it would have gotten worse." "I didn't think it was heroic. That's exactly what impresses me. You don't sell yourself as special." "But you are." She lowered her eyes. "Answer me," he continued. "Why don't you ever try to stand out?" "Because those who try become targets, and I've got plenty of arrows in my back already." Andrew gave a short, sheepish laugh. He understood more than he expected. The next day, she was arranging a meeting room when he appeared again, without warning, leaned on the door. "Lunch now?" "Almost. Can you walk with me?" She hesitated. "Okay." They went to the staff cafeteria together. They didn't talk much on the way. At the line, he filled his plate without ceremony, rice, chicken, salad, like everyone else. They took a corner table. At first, Julia was uncomfortable. She disliked attention, and this clearly drew eyes. But the conversation eased. They talked food, music. He told her he had lived abroad for a while, that the pressure to uphold his father's name in the company was something he still carried. Julia talked about books, translations she'd done, how she'd learned German with old dictionaries and video lessons. It flowed. "You're nothing like I imagined," he said at one point. "Different how?" "I don't know. I expected someone colder, more closed off." "I'm practical, not cold." "Yeah, I noticed." "But you've got something that makes people want to keep listening." She stayed quiet, fidgeted with her water cup, wary of that kind of compliment, but for some reason didn't think he was trying to flatter her. It felt sincere. That night at home, she stared at the ceiling a while before sleeping, thinking of everything, how he spoke to her, the less formal chats, the respect he showed, and how it stirred a part of her she'd kept buried. She knew this kind of closeness at work could become a problem, especially with so many rooting against her. She couldn't afford to be distracted or tie herself to something that might be just curiosity. Even so, she liked being seen, and the way Andrew looked at her wasn't boss to employee anymore. Saturday morning, Julia woke early, as always. Even off, her body rose at the same time. Her mother was still sleeping. Sunlight skimmed the window, and the apartment's quiet felt good. For the first time in a while, Julia felt things moving, imperfect, but toward dignity. She made coffee, sliced bread, warmed milk, and sat at the table, phone in hand, ready to scan the workgroup chat and hotel updates. A WhatsApp message popped up from a number she hadn't seen in years. "Hey, it's me. We need to talk. Meet me today at 4 p.m. at the bar on your corner. It's important." That was it, but the name on the screen froze her. Rodney. She stared at the message. For a moment, she thought she was reading it wrong, but she wasn't. It was him, the ex who vanished when everything fell apart. The same one who swore eternal love until the day she lost her job. And he disappeared. No warning, no explanation. Her heart sped up. She breathed and locked the phone, tried to ignore it. She couldn't. The memories rose in bitter waves, the promises, the plans that never left paper, the vanishing, the cowardice. During the day, she tried to distract herself, cleaned, helped her mom bathe, did laundry, but at 3:40 she was ready. She grabbed her bag, told her mom she was going to buy bread, and left. She was nervous, not because she wanted to see Rodney, but because she couldn't understand why he was back. The bar was the same as always, simple, plastic tables a little crooked, a ceiling fan turning lazily. She arrived at 4 sharp, and there he was, sitting in the back, grey t-shirt, phone in hand, as if time hadn't passed. He stood with an automatic smile when he saw her. "Hey, Jules." She stood a moment, then sat slowly. "What do you want?" "Easy. I didn't come to fight. I wanted to talk. Ask how you are. I missed you." She let out an ironic laugh. "Missed me now? I know ghosting was wrong, but I was lost. Your mum was sick. You were unemployed. Everything was heavy. I panicked and ran. I messed up. Being silent for over 2 years isn't a mistake, Rodney. It's abandonment." He lowered his eyes. "I know, and I won't make excuses. I was weak. But I've changed, really." She folded her arms. "Why did you call me here?" He breathed. "Because I heard things. That you're working at a luxury hotel, that you're standing out, that the owner has been talking to you. I thought I could try to get close again. Start over. I regret. Leaving and seeing you now rising reminded me how different you are." She felt heat surge, but kept control. "You came because you heard I'm rising. Not for me. It's not just that. I realized I left the wrong person." She stood instantly. "Rodney, look at me. You're not here for me. You're here for what you think I might become. I'm not a trampoline, and I don't want people near me out of interest." He tried to reach for her. "Julia, wait. Don't call me Jules. You lost that right." She left without looking back. On the sidewalk, she breathed. Her hands shook, not with emotion but with anger. She couldn't believe he had the nerve to return as if nothing had happened. As if her getting a little better was his cue to latch on. The next day, when she got to the hotel, Martha was off, smiling suspiciously. A few hours later, the whispers began. An admin intern by the coffee machine. "Hear this? Supposedly Julia had a thing with a guy who vanished, and now he's back. They say he showed up at the hotel she heard, and knew who had spread it. Rodney." At lunch, Julia got a text, not from him, from an unknown number. No profile pic. Short words. "You're not fooling anyone. We know what you want. You'll fall." She showed no one, just deleted, but her mind wouldn't settle. Later, Andrew texted plainly, "You okay?" "If you want to talk, I'm around." She replied quickly, "I'm fine. Thank you." She wasn't. And worst of all, now, besides inside envy, Julia would have to deal with ghosts from outside. People who used the past as a threat, people who popped up when they smelled victory. She knew that if she didn't hold fast, she could lose everything she was building. But she also knew how to defend herself. And if she had to start over again, she wouldn't do it beside someone who only shows up after the storm has passed. In the days after the meeting with Rodney, Julia's mind was a storm. She tried to focus on work, but it felt as if someone were always peeking over her shoulder. She was sure Rodney's words had travelled straight to Martha's mouth, who now seemed more active than ever, spreading comments disguised as concern. "Some people come here with a hidden past and nobody knows," Martha said loudly during a locker room break. "We must be careful with people who climb too fast." No one answered, but the heavy silence said everything. It was a clear jab, and Julia knew it. She walked the hotel corridors rigidly, as if holding her anger in place. She wasn't the type to fight, but she wouldn't let them step on her again. There was also something else in the air, a proposal. Lauren had asked to speak at the end of the shift. They met in the little events team room, tiny table, 2 chairs, Old AC in the corner humming. Lauren wore a serious expression. Julia, I'll be direct. We want to pull you into the department permanently, events assistant. Not temporary, it's a regular position, with different pay and better benefits. You've already shown what you can do, but there's one thing. What? We need a yes now, because if you accept, the change has to go through next week. HR needs to update everything, and you have to be officially removed from housekeeping. Julia stood silent, looked at Lauren, then at her own hand on the table. There are people against this, aren't there? There are. Not a few. But I don't care, and Andrew doesn't either. The question is, can you handle what comes? I can. I just don't know if now is the time. Lauren didn't push, only said, think, and give me an answer by tomorrow. Think about what you want, not what others think. On the way home, Julia walked slowly. She felt like even the city was watching. When she arrived, her mother was watching TV. She sat beside her without a word. They stayed silent a few minutes. Why the face? Her mother asked out of nowhere. They offered me a permanent role in events. And that's bad. Why? Because it seems like every time I take a step up, someone tries to pull the rug. And you're going to let them? Julia didn't answer. Since when do you hide your light to spare someone else's shadow? That hit hard. She had never heard her mother put it that way. But it was exactly what she needed. The next day, before replying to Lauren, she had to face something else. HR called her. A routine meeting, they said. But when she arrived, there was a new manager in the room with a supervisor she'd barely met. The tone was formal, but the subject was clear. Julia, we received comments about a recent involvement with an ex-boyfriend who supposedly visited the hotel. She didn't let them finish. I've never brought anyone here. What happened was personal, on my day off, on my block. If you doubt it, check cameras and entry logs. No visits, no contact here. My record is clean, professionally and personally. The supervisor tried to soften. We're just checking, Julia. Protocol. She stood. Protocol. Fine. Let me know when you check who spreads the rumors too. She left with her head high, but shaking inside. Her anger wasn't at the lies anymore. It was at always having to prove she deserved to be there, as if nothing were ever enough. Late in the day, she walked into Lauren's office without knocking. I accept the job, and we don't need to wait till next week. We can start now. Lauren smiled slightly. You sure? I am. And if anyone has a problem with it, they can take it up with their own conscience. The coordinator signed the paperwork with her then and there, messaged HR, and in the system Julia was officially listed as events assistant at the Atlantic Grand. That day, when she left the employee doors, she didn't take the left like always. She turned right, wanted to breathe different air, to feel that for the first time she'd chosen for herself. Not out of fear, not out of need, but because she deserved it. Across the street, leaning on a beat-up car, Rodney watched from a distance, phone in hand, eyes fixed on her. As Julia walked on, he dialed a number, said something fast and smiled. The smile of someone who still hadn't learned to lose. Julia's name already showed in the system as events assistant. Her new badge arrived on day 2, along with a folder with the company logo, a blue pen, and the notice that from that week on, she would be part of the permanent bilingual support team. No temp status, official. She clipped the badge to her chest calmly, straightened the white shirt of the new uniform, and looked at the locker room mirror. For the first time, she didn't feel out of place. She wasn't the girl who helped. She was the person responsible, the one who had cleared the steps without patronage or shortcuts. But the day had barely begun when the first bomb dropped. Before noon, an internal HR alert hit Lauren's phone. It was blunt. Employee involved in inappropriate conduct. Anonymous report attached. The attachment contained screenshots of messages that Julia supposedly sent to a foreign guest, offering special attention off hours. Lauren called Julia immediately. She walked in with steady posture, but a pounding heart. Julia, tell me this is fake, Lauren said, turning her laptop so Julia could see. Julia stepped closer and examined the images. They looked authentic. The writing style similar, the same name, but the sender's number wasn't hers. She took a breath and held back the urge to run. It wasn't me. I've never messaged any guest. I believe you, Lauren said. But there's more. This went to HR and legal, and by protocol, there'll be an internal inquiry. You need to step aside until we clear this. It hit like a punch. Step aside? It's not punishment, it's precaution. The hotel can't keep someone in client-facing duties with an open allegation. Julia sat down slowly. This was a setup. I know who sent it. Lauren looked at her. Martha. Martha, or Rodney, or both. Lauren closed the laptop and lowered her voice. I believe you, but you'll have to defend yourself with proof. Fast. There are people waiting for you to fall. Julia left with trembling hands. She stepped outside where no one walked at that hour, leaned on the wall and breathed. Her chest hurt, from anger, from fear, from injustice. She grabbed her phone and called. Rodney, I've been suspended over fake messages. Was that you? Silence, then his voice, low. I only sent some things I thought might raise questions. I didn't know they'd act like this. You didn't know. You did it on purpose. You want to knock me down. I wanted you to remember I exist. You never really existed. You only showed up to latch onto my progress. If you think this will stop me, get ready. I'll get up stronger. She hung up, returned to the hotel, and asked for a meeting with legal. She provided screenshots of her own messages with her mom, with Lauren, with co-workers. She showed she had never contacted any guest. She requested access logs to prove that on the dates shown in the fake screenshots, she was inside the hotel and without her personal phone, locked in her locker. Late in the afternoon, Andrew arrived. As soon as he heard, he told them to freeze everything. He walked straight into HR, read the reports, and listened to Julia, who spoke without tears or theatrics, just truth. I've never degraded myself to prove my worth, and I wouldn't start now. Andrew was silent a few seconds, then turned to legal. I want everything tracked, from the source number to system access. If this is false, we won't just reinstate Julia. We'll prosecute whoever did it. 2 days, the confirmation came. The screenshots were manipulated. The number belonged to a burner SIM. Julia's phone showed no history of that conversation, and the guest named didn't even remember seeing her. The report was closed. Julia was called back. Not only that, Andrew gathered the events and admin teams and said plainly, any attempt to bring down colleagues out of jealousy, envy, or lies will be treated as fraud. And the company will act. That afternoon, Martha was called in. She left the room with a tight face and hard eyes. She wasn't fired, yet, but the warning was clear. She was on notice. When Julia returned to the department, the whole atmosphere shifted. People who had whispered now faked friendliness. People who had criticized now offered greetings. She wasn't fooled. Real respect doesn't come from words, but from behavior. In the elevator, Andrew found her alone. Still want to stay? More than ever. Want to grow? Yes, but my way, without stepping on anyone. That's the only right way. They stood quietly for a moment. Then he said, you're not just a good employee, you're one of the best this hotel has ever had. She gave a short, firm smile, and there, in that cramped elevator, no audience, no fanfare, Julia understood it wasn't just about the role, it was about who she was becoming, someone no one could erase. The following week, the mood at the Atlantic Grand felt different, not because problems vanished, but because Julia had finally become what no one could ignore, a reference point. She still drew side-eyes in the halls, but now there was something else behind them. Respect, maybe fear, and a curiosity that never ended. After the false report scandal, leadership tightened internal protocols. Everyone moved more carefully, even Martha, who remained in her role but acted with exaggerated caution, like she was walking on cracked ground. Julia, on the other hand, walked with her head up, not out of arrogance but relief and the rare feeling of finally standing where she belonged after pushing a boulder uphill for so long. One cloudy Monday afternoon, Andrew texted something simple. Got time to talk today? It's good news. She replied yes and waited. The meeting was in an admin room after peak hours, no one peeking through the door. Andrew wore a casual shirt, sleeves rolled, a contained smile. Sit, he said. I'll get straight to it. I'm opening a new position in the company's communications group, not just the hotel, the special projects and international partnerships side. It's a new role, and I want to invite you to take it." Julia stayed silent a few seconds. He continued, "I considered looking for someone with a long resume and big-name employers. But the truth is I've already found that person. And it's you. Fluent, smart, steady, committed, and most importantly, someone who understands the reality of those at the bottom and those at the top." No course teaches that, she breathed. "Andrew, this is huge. I've never done anything like it. No one has before they start. If I waited for someone ready, I'd leave the role unfilled. And the team? I wasn't welcomed when I climbed one rung. I'll handle the team. And you're not climbing a rung, you're changing floors." She laughed nervously. She still didn't know whether to believe or to protect herself. "And if it goes wrong, it'll go right. And if something goes wrong, we'll adjust. What we can't do is keep you where you no longer fit." She lowered her eyes. She thought of her mom, how the salary would help, the pride of going home and saying her badge had changed, her life had changed. She also thought of the weight, the responsibility, and how it would shake others. "I need a day to think. Take it. But I'll tell you this, the role is yours. It only depends on you accepting." She left with wobbly legs. It was like her body hadn't caught up with what her ears had heard. She walked the corridor with firm steps but a racing heart. At the exit, she passed Martha. They locked eyes a fraction of a second. Martha tried to keep her pose, but it wasn't the same as before. Julia walked on. That night at the kitchen table, she told her mother everything. "You'll take it, right?" her mum asked, voice stronger than it had been in a while. "I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of messing up, of not keeping up, of becoming a target again." Her mum squeezed her hand and spoke without hesitation. "Everyone messes up. Being seen for who you are, that doesn't happen every day. Some people spend a lifetime waiting for that chance." The next morning, Julia arrived early, went to the 8th floor, knocked, and stepped in. Andrew was already there. She didn't say good morning, didn't stall. "I accept," he smiled. "There we go, but with one condition." "Which?" "That I don't have to change who I am to fit this role. That I don't have to become a character, come as you are. That's the person who made me choose you." They shook hands without ceremony, but with the firmness of people who knew everything was about to change. At day's end, she went to the pharmacy, bought her mother's medicine, and more. She paid for a private neurology appointment she'd been waiting over a year to get through the county clinic. She went home with a bag of medication, a new planner, and a feeling she hadn't had in a long time. Peace. On the fridge, she pinned a note with a magnet. In firm letters, she wrote, "Now we go." The new role was still fresh, but Julia moved as if born for it. In a single week, she organized a presentation for an international hotel group, coordinated simultaneous interpretation, and even helped the marketing team with a company video. Still, she stayed grounded. She ate lunch at the same simple spot as always, greeted everyone with the same good morning, and sat with anyone, without acting above others. What she could no longer hide was the way Andrew looked at her. Some days he'd show up in her area just to drop off a paper, but linger longer than necessary, and when she spoke, he listened as if studying every word, without hurry, without interruption. On a Wednesday, late in the day, everything turned. There was a corporate dinner at a restaurant atop the tower where the company's HQ sat. Panoramic view, refined cuisine, decor designed to impress. Andrew invited Julia personally. "You're coming, right?" "Me? At that kind of event?" "Yes. Your leadership now, and more than that, I want you there." She hesitated. "I don't know if I'll feel comfortable." "You already have the confidence. You just need the habit." Trust me, she came. Simple black dress, hair in a bun, light makeup, elegant without trying. When she walked into the room, heads turned, including Andrew's. He was mid-conversation with directors and stopped in the middle of a sentence when he saw her. He took 2 steps away from the group and went to her. "Thought you weren't coming." "I thought so too," she said, a little shy. "You look great," she smiled. "You're not looking bad yourself." He laughed. "Come on, I want to introduce you." During dinner, Julia talked with senior leaders, traded ideas with executives from abroad, And in no time she was in the middle of a strategy chat, not just participating, leading. Andrew watched from a distance, proud, but with a weight in his chest too, admiration mingled with something else he hesitated to name, or maybe he knew but avoided. Later, after most guests had left and the room was quieter, he approached. "Want to step outside?" "It's getting stuffy," she agreed. They took the elevator to the tower's terrace, broad wooden deck, glass railing, the city lit up beneath them. A cool breeze hit their faces. They stood in silence for a few seconds, staring at the view. "Do you fit here?" he said suddenly. "Here where?" "Up here, in this place, in this kind of setting. Were you born to go far, Julia?" She eyed him, wary. "Be serious. You're surrounded by people like this all the time. Wealthy, polished, credentialed, and none of them makes me stop to listen the way you do." Julia stayed quiet. Andrew stepped one closer. "You know what I like most about you?" "What?" "You don't try. You just are." She let out a short laugh. "Was that a pickup line?" "No, just the truth. But since you asked—" He met her eyes. "I thought hard before saying this, because we work together and this isn't a soap opera, but I can't pretend what I feel is only professional admiration." She said nothing. The wind toyed with loose strands of her hair. "I like you, Julia. I like your strength, your way of seeing the world, how you don't bend. I'm not saying this to confuse you. I don't want you to feel pressured. I just needed you to know." She breathed and looked at the horizon. "Are you really ready to deal with what that means?" "I am, even if you say no." "And if I say yes?" "I'll wait." She laughed softly. "It's the first time anyone has told me that without wanting something in return. I don't want anything you don't want to give." They stood side by side, without touching, just letting the silence sit. There was no kiss, no embrace, but there was truth, and a huge desire to let time slow. In that moment, Julia realized that the connection she'd spent her life avoiding might be exactly what she was ready to live now. Without fear, without disguises, without obligation, simply because she felt it. It was a regular Tuesday. Hot sun, busy hotel, scheduled meetings. Everything normal. Julia had been in the new role for 2 months, and the routine had finally found a rhythm that didn't demand survival every second. She could breathe. What she didn't know was that the day would flip everything. Early morning, as she answered emails in her new office, Lauren rushed in with a folder. "Julia, I need to show you something." Julia set her laptop aside and looked up. Lauren seemed agitated. "What happened?" Lauren opened the folder and took out an envelope with the seal of a European foundation. An official document, stamped. She handed it to Julia with a shaky hand. "This arrived in the mail. Security asked if there was someone named Julia Marks. When they realized it was you, they brought it straight to me." Julia took the envelope, puzzled. It was addressed to her, with a Munich, Germany stamp. The sender was a law firm. She had never heard of it. She opened it. Inside was a letter, a notarized document, and a photo. As she read, she froze. Lauren watched silently. The letter said Julia had been registered as the biological daughter of Klaus Heinhardt, the German millionaire she herself had helped translate months earlier at the front desk. The document was a DNA test, done in secret at his request, using a hairbrush she had used in the locker room. That brush had gone missing for a few days, and she'd thought she'd lost it. The photo showed him with a brunette woman who looked very much like Julia. On the back, in pen, was the woman's name, Lucy Marks, Julia's mother. She read everything twice more, unable to process. Lauren sat beside her. "Julia, are you okay?" I don't know what this means." "It means you need to talk to your mum." Julia stood, grabbed her bag, and left the hotel without a word. She went straight home. Her mother was on the couch with the TV on. When she saw her daughter's face, she turned it off at once. "What is it?" Julia tossed the papers on the table. "What is this, Mom?" Lucy lifted the documents and took her time. She read each page slowly, her hand shaking. "I was going to tell you, but I never thought it was the right time." "You knew?" "I did. And yes, it's true. Klaus was my boyfriend for a while, before I met the man who raised you. We got involved. It was quick, messy. He had to go back to Germany. I found out I was pregnant weeks later. I tried to contact him, but he never answered. I thought he'd forgotten me. Why didn't you tell me? Because you already had a father here, even if he wasn't present. And because I thought Klaus was the past, Julia sat on the couch, feeling the world tilt. He showed up that day at the hotel, and I didn't suspect a thing. I helped him, translated, and he knew, maybe not then, but apparently he checked. He had the money and the means. And now he wants to tell you why. Why now? Lucy drew a breath. Maybe he's sick, or found out he never had anyone else, or maybe he finally regrets leaving. At the end of the letter, Klaus said he wanted to meet officially, that he'd be in the US for 2 more weeks, staying at one of the company's hotels, and that he hoped she would reach out if she was willing. The next morning, Julia sent a short message. I'd like to talk. I'm ready. 2 hours later, she was going up the stairs of an executive suite in another Atlantic Grand property. When the door opened, he was there. White hair, firm gaze, gentle. You came? I did. May I hug you? She didn't answer in words, she nodded. He hugged her like someone carrying decades of guilt. There was no dramatic crying, just a silence full of weight and relief at once. They talked for almost 2 hours. He told her everything, confirmed that he'd found out about the pregnancy years later from others, that he'd been a coward, that he followed her life from afar, and that seeing her there, fluent, bright, strong, he realized he'd lost more than he imagined. I didn't come to buy you, or to drown you with promises. I came to ask forgiveness, and, if you want, to include you in my life. If you don't, I'll understand. Julia looked at him. I don't know what I want yet. Take all the time you need. When she left, she went straight to Andrew's office. He sat alone with spreadsheets on the screen. Can I tell you something? Always. She stepped in, closed the door. My life just turned upside down, and I have no idea how I'll handle it. But I do know one thing. What? I want to stay here. Not for safety, but because this is where I recognize myself. Andrew stood and walked to her. I don't know what happened, but whatever it is, I'm on your side. That's more than I expected. She smiled. He smiled back. And in that moment, Julia understood the world could spin too fast, but if you have some place to plant your feet, you can weather any sudden turn, even the most unexpected. Thank you for listening.